So, welcome to Hearts, and I'm so excited this week because it's been a little while, but I have finally got together with Sarah. Now, I've got you with Sarah Greening. So, how do you?
Yeah, I changed my name to be Sarah Marie on the Zoom call. Sarah Greening is my official name, but I prefer just Sarah.
Okay, well, Sarah, who is the chief of staff for Ley Love Down, Ben's number two right hand woman, and Sarah has got quite an interesting background. She had done her PhD in organic chemistry. So I just got that all clear with you. And you've been working away since 2020 doing all sorts to, I guess, make ends meet and put that into practice. But also, Sarah's been really lovely to me. And we made contact. Actually, it was after it was when I was speaking to Rachel, and she had just spoken to you beforehand. And she said, "Oh, I've got this message. I've got to tell you about Sarah." And she said, like, her last name's Green something. And so that was actually my introduction to you, because I then started to see you pop up with your photos from over in Nova Scotia. And then I reached out to you a little bit because we have a little bit of a shared background in that I married somebody from Newfoundland and you are from Newfoundland.
Yes, yes. Love fellow Newfoundlanders. We are
I
s
know. Every time I tell somebody I married a guy from Newfoundland, and everyone's like, "Where?" It's like Newfoundland.
yeah, or Newfoundland as they sometimes say.
Yeah.
But really, John Cabot supposedly landed and was like, this is a newfound land, and that's how it got its name.
Right. Except for the Vikings that had been there, and everybody, and the Beothuk and everybody
Yeah,
else.
yeah, exactly,
Oh, thank you so much for joining me, Sarah. And yeah, you've been really lovely. You've been reaching out and checking up on me after having a little incident and going to the hospital.
Yeah, well, when you share something heavy like that, I'm like, well, geez, I need to make sure this lady's okay. You know, being in the hospital
Yeah,
for
it
something
turned
serious
out to
like that.
be a very transient gallstone, which I like to call gravel. I've just had a bit of gravel.
Okay. Get some rocks stuck in there.
Yeah. And I've also, because I came home and checked in my your body is the barometer of your soul book,
Mm.
and it said gallbladder or gallstones were all about bitterness and not letting things go. So
Oh.
I felt like those little stones that gave me such a hard time were actually a really good physical representation of actually letting some of that go and reminding myself that I need to just wipe the slate clean a little bit around some of that bitterness that I've held around the COVID stuff, around my old health connections to the health system. It was very ironic to end up in the hospital where I had, you know, basically been working for about, I don't know, 16 years, and to be on the other side of it. I actually didn't work in the hospital that much of that time, but to end up on the other side, and I was very grateful. And I had to have more compassion for the people who work there because I could see the conditions they were working in, and it was really tough.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I still wish I could like enlighten a whole lot of them about a whole lot of stuff, but I
Yeah,
was very grateful.
in due time, right? In due
Yeah,
time.
that's right. Yes, but anyway, so the point of that was that you were very kind and you reached out, and actually I think I reached out to you, didn't I, at one point and
You
said,
did. I don't remember how the conversation went, but there was something that you just wanted me to
I was
just
like, can you just check in for me? I think I was right like that desperate. I was like, who can check in for me and see what's going on? And you came back and you gave me great advice, and you'd seen people, you'd seen attachments and all sorts going on, and I knew that because Ben had talked about that before when I'd spoken to him. So I think that's why I reached out to you. I was like, I need somebody who can just take a look and see what the hell's going on here.
yeah, no, absolutely. I have to be honest, I know this is being recorded. I don't know if anybody that I know knows that I'm doing this podcast, but the journey that I've gone in the past year and, the spiritual development and all of these things, learning about attachments and how to deal with them and all of that. I've never spoken about it openly online before, apart from private one-on-one conversations. So this is a new experience for me, and I'm trying to just let it flow and embrace it. But it's gonna take me a
Yeah.
second to get comfortable with that.
Okay, that's fair because I just jumped right in there.
Yeah. Well, it's just I guess it's like the fear of being seen, the fear of, what people may say, but um, it is what it is. It is the reality we live in. It's just that not everybody is awake to it, right? So,
Yeah. Well, we're all kind of choosing our realities, aren't we?
absolutely. And when you realize that you can choose your reality and how you you can react to certain situations, kind of like you talking about needing to just let things go. That is so powerful. Uh, Earlier there was a conversation in the house and there was things talking about, oh, Biden's going to start World War III or something like that. And all I said was just like, no, 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 no. Put that aside. Put it aside. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it because you're just going to kind of give that energy to that to allow that to happen. So just don't worry
Mm.
about it. Just move on with your day.
Yeah, and it's really powerful, isn't it, to be able to make those decisions for yourself in a conscious way. I
It,
did have a big conversation with somebody about spiritual bypassing because I think that was when I was speaking to Narita. I felt like I'd been a bit of a rain cloud on other people's sunny days, going, don't spiritually bypass. But but there is a balance in that.
yeah,
But certainly we don't need to engage with the things that we don't want.
nope, nope, definitely not.
And I guess it's really hard because that's a very indoctrinated belief that we've all been taught.
Yeah, I mean, we've been indoctrinated pretty much from the time you're born all the way through, told what to do, what to think. I mean, I can remember, I don't know, just my background into getting to the spiritual side of things where I am now has been quite an interesting journey. Not that I'm any different from anybody else, but I grew up in a Christian household. My grandfather was part of the church. Heavily, like he used to give sermons and was church treasurer for like 40 years. So heavily involved in the church. And then in high school, I had a world religions class, and I got to learn about other religions that I didn't know existed before then, because having grown up in small town Newfoundland, you have your five churches in the town, and that was all you knew. You didn't know anything beyond that. It was never ever talked about. And so it's like, hold up, there are other religions, there were other beliefs, there are other, things out there. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And it kind of like opened my eyes and opened my heart as well. And then somebody that I had spent quite a number of years with, his family actually converted to Islam at some point. So through most of my 20s, I was semi a practicing Muslim in a way, more so in the sense that I didn't eat pork. Music was a little bit to the side, and just kind of, not that I didn't like pray 5 times a day or go to the mosque or anything, but just, oh, I participated in Ramadan as well, which was a very, very interesting experience to fast for 30 days. Well, not like, you participate in the fasting. No food or drink up sun up to sundown. So that was interesting experience. And I just remember when I got away from that, and it kind of became when I became really hardcore scientists. And you look around with what's going on in the world, and at some point you're just like, how can there be this magical being in the sky that's like taught in religion that's just going to solve everything when it doesn't, when there's so much bad in the world. So I pretty much went from Christianity to Islam to like pretty much atheist, just not believing in anything. And I was really into science. It's like, how can you be a scientist and have this connection to the non-physical physical realm? And I was very fortunate. I say fortunate now that I got exposed probably by source to putting it out there for me to see. Several people that I went to school with that would go to church or they would pray, and they were still chemists, they were still scientists. I was like, my brain just couldn't comprehend how the two worlds could exist. I just didn't understand it. And then one friend said to me, she's like, we don't have any proof that it does exist, and we don't have any proof that it doesn't exist. So until there are facts one way or the other, it's kind of all up on the table. And that changed something in me because it spoke to my left brain, my scientist brain, that's like, you're right, there are no facts against it. So if there are no facts against it, then it's still a possibility. And then I learned of the term to be agnostic. So to believe in something more, you don't know what it is, but there's got to be something more than just the reality we see. And that started pretty much the journey of where I am now.
Well, it sounds like it's been a pretty rapid journey for you. So you said so you basically graduated after the COVID pandemic had started, but you'd already finished your studies, I presume.
Yeah, I was done. I was looking for a job. I had one interview in February and then just didn't hear back because 2 weeks later the world shut down. So I was looking for my full-time job all through COVID, was not getting anywhere. And then my PhD supervisor basically just gave me a position to hold me over until I could find something more and the world restarted.
Well, thank God for that. What was the university you went to?
Dalhousie University.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And so had you already moved over to Nova Scotia before studying university, or was that because of the program?
Uh, so I spent about 8 years in Florida working towards an undergrad,
Oh,
and then
wow.
I come to Nova Scotia for my PhD.
Okay. So you got some sunshine.
I did, and I do miss it. The climate is really, you get very much accustomed to sun every day, being able to walk around in flip-flops all year round. It's just great. And I remember like, coming from Newfoundland where we have some pretty harsh winters, as you would know, to go to Florida, and then you become accustomed to the temperature in Florida. And then by like January, you wake up one morning and there's frost on the car and you're like, "Oh my gosh, it's so cold. It's so cold." And I got like the next time I went to Newfoundland, I brought down my winter jacket because I never thought I would need it. But it's just a funny little story about it being cold in Florida, but you get frost in the morning and by lunchtime it's 20 degrees Celsius. So
Yeah. Oh, wow. So that's a really varied little journey. So how come Florida then?
yeah, the person I spoke about that his family converted to Islam, that was kind of following at the time my heart, I guess, but I don't really know anymore if that was that. Perhaps it was a soul contract that needed to be you know, um put forth, but
Well, it really made you do some different stuff, so that's got to be important.
yeah, I hope so.
And so the organic biochemistry or chemistry, it was organic chemistry,
It's
wasn't
funny that you say biochemistry because that was actually what my undergrad was in. So are you like digging in a little bit there?
it? Probably. And I wonder, actually, I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, oh God, I want to do your numbers. I just wonder how much seven is in you because you've
Hmm.
got this seeking for the truth
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
out.
By all means, I've never been officially numerologied, if that's a word.
Have you met Georgina Grace? Have
I've
you had?
I've not like met her face to face, but I've seen a couple of her podcasts, especially with Ben. The two of them are just a hoot together. So
I know. Yeah, well, she's a very good teacher. So that's how I came into neurology because Rachel did her course and I was like, I'm doing that too.
yeah.
But it's like a pseudoscience, I suppose, but it's so interesting reading energy in a way that is so structured.
But pseudoscience, that's an interesting term because I feel that pseudoscience is kind of like it's for science what conspiracy theory is for truth seekers and critical thinkers. Like it's, it's a curiosity and you're exploring it. Okay, sure, you've not done a technical degree in chemistry or biology, you're not following, you know, all the details that are laid out in the book, but we've talked about indoctrination and, who's not to say that some of the stuff that's in the textbooks is not, you know, purposely designed. So
Mm.
pseudoscience, I feel, is a term. It rubs me the wrong way because
Yeah.
uh
Yeah. As soon as I said it, I thought, I'm not sure, but yeah, I agree. I mean, I did my degree years ago, and it was a Bachelor of Health Science. So I did the anatomy and physiology. I've actually done anatomy and physiology papers about 3 times with different things. And now I'm like, well, I don't know what level of truth are we at with that? I'm not sure. The heart seems to be, a vortex, which makes perfect sense to me. And yeah, there's so much that I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface of.
oh, 100%. And in my journey in the last year, that has been one thing that's been has had so many questions because you start to question everything. Once you know that one thing is not the way it seems, then you're like, okay, what about this thing? And what about that thing? And there was a point that I was like, are carbon atoms even real? I just like started to go real into the chemistry. And I don't know where I fell. I kind of got, I don't think distracted is the right word, but my attention was going. That's not the purpose of my current journey anyway, is not to figure out what's wrong with what they've taught us in school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, gosh, you could spend a whole lot of time and energy in that space, couldn't you? And come to no conclusions.
And in the current reality, it wouldn't matter. And if anything, it would just possibly be a detriment.
Mm. So, okay, so how did you start to have your spiritual gifts come in? Because you
Yeah.
certainly have them.
Yeah, and I'm still figuring them out on a daily basis too. I would I get mixed geez, I can't think of the word. Mixed vibes about it. I would say that I really started to seek out the universe and to really dive into things after my grandma passed, which was in April of 2023. But I think that the gifts have always been there in some form. I just wasn't necessarily fully conscious of them, I guess. But
Mm.
with COVID, COVID, as it was designed to introduce a lot of fear, put everybody into a fear state and a low vibrational state. And my last year of my PhD, which was leading up into COVID, it was my last year of my PhD. It was supposed to be, this big important year. And it started off with my mom being sick in the hospital and pretty much being on her deathbed. Like weren't thinking that she wasn't going to make it. She did, thankfully. Because I was not ready to lose her during the last year of my PhD. Um, so it was just very stressful. It was a very rocky time and finished my PhD and then the world shuts down, it's all new, that was the first experience in my lifetime of anything like that. Of course we had things like 9/11 when I was in like junior high and those things, but this was massive. And I just ended up living in a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And I've had a lot of family members as well that have been very sick or have died over the years due to various health conditions, and that kind of made me feel anxious about my own health as well. It's just like from every angle was just layers of anxiety, layers of fear. And so a couple months after my grandma passed, one day I just woke up and I was just like, like, I don't want to live in fear anymore. I don't want to live in anxiety. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And I just kind of just reached out to the universe and said, okay, I'm ready. I don't want this anymore. And it's been a snowball effect since then.
That's massive. Was there like an event or a particular thing that really triggered that for you, or was that just
Um, just trying to think. Th it's been like there was definitely an event that had happened where it was like, boom, I am like, full on, okay, literally something has activated and I went into panic mode. Went into panic mode. I did end up in the hospital as well for a couple days because of it. But it was about 3 or 4 months before that that I had actually I remember I would go to, and of everything I know now, I know that that was probably not the thing to do, but at the same time, I felt like I was led to do it. There's a local graveyard it's a really nice graveyard. It's a Catholic graveyard. Don't know if that's important, but there's like this hill and it had a bench that faced the sun. And I used to go and sit on the bench, sit in the sun in the morning, and I would put on high vibrational frequency music on Spotify, like really, really high level. And I've never meditated in my life before those particular moments, but I would just sit there quiet, trying to quiet my thoughts and just seeing what would come in. And slowly there was a connection that was established, which I assume now is with source. And yeah, it's been just a journey since then. I don't know. I really like it when you ask me questions because then it directs me because there could be so many different angles that I could just come at and I could probably talk an hour or more. So I am known as a talker.
well, that's the three energy.
Yeah, okay.
I'm definitely going to do your numbers after.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, I can see. Yeah, it sounds like there was a progression as well as obviously some sentinel things for you. Um, and how did you come into Ley Love Down?
Yeah, how did I come into Ley Love Down? I believe it was through Dorita's podcast. So I just happened to stumble across a podcast with her and Rachel and just fell in love with Rachel. I'm like, okay, I need every interview I can get with Rachel. And then I stumbled across one with Rachel and Ben. I was like, okay, cool. What's this? And heard about Ley Love Down and was like, oh, this is really interesting. This sounds like something I want to be a part of and joined it. And yeah, things have just really have again snowballed, for lack of a better expression, since then.
Yeah,
And
well, you jumped right in and put your hand up to help, which is such a big, I mean, so many people hang back, right? So that's a massive, once you jump in like that, you're really committing.
yeah, well, there was some stuff happening in the background for myself as well, because since I've woken up, I've just been on this journey of trying to figure out what my path is, what is my soul purpose, and wasn't really getting to the meat of what exactly that was. I knew that it was involved with some sort of energy work and healing long before I met Ley Love Down. I actually read or listened to an audiobook by Dr. Bradley Nielsen, I think his name is. He did something called the two books. One's called The Body Code and the other one is called The Emotion Code. And it just talks about it talks about the meridians in the body and just how you can I think really what it was describing is quantum healing in a way, but it didn't use those terms. But it just talked about ways that you can heal, you can have trapped trauma and energy in your body and that sort of thing. So I was kind of like already in that space before I heard of Ley Love Down. And yeah, and then Ben had put out a call for that they were looking for a volunteer. I can't even remember what exactly it was looking for, but the night before that video came out, I was speaking to my higher self and I was just like, I need some guidance. Like, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? And then as soon as I saw that video, it was just like if somebody could push me, they were pushing me to reach out to Ben, and I sent an email to Ben, and things just went from there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a really nice confirmation for you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And it feels like it's, I don't know, I just feel like we're like teetering on the edge of something quite massive because there's so much happening out in the world around ley lines and song lines, and just in our connection with Mother Nature,
Yep.
and even your little story then, I was like, I just wonder how much of what was happening for you when you were sitting on that bench was about where you were as
Oh,
well, how
I've
much
all
you needed to be in that place.
I just got some shivers that went down, so definitely. And I've had those thoughts before then as well. And I don't want to go into too much detail about it because the stuff is, so, some of the work that needs to be done with the ley lines and the energy lines doesn't
Mm.
necessarily need to be completely public, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Um, yeah,
Uh,
but there is so much good to be done, and there's so much
Absolutely.
love and connection being built around that. I actually had a phone call the other day from a lady who heads up the New Zealand Dowsers Association or
Right.
Society here. So that's very exciting. So I feel like there's a whole lot of strands of people who have been doing this work in different ways, and they're starting to really thread themselves together. Um, but I really have this feeling that our way through all of this is to be in contact with the earth and be in
Yep.
contact with nature. Like, to me, that seems like that's where the doorway is open.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I mean, you can talk to Mother Earth just like you talk to Source. So,
Yeah, and I mean, the more time you spend in nature, the more you realize how many different elements are out there trying to reach out to you. Um, I did have the pleasure of doing the course that Trevor Wee just
oh,
ran.
nice. Right.
But of course, I was in the hospital when it started, so I've kind of been catching up on that. But that again has just brought a lot of things. It's just made me think about things in a slightly different way, and all of it makes perfect sense. Like everything that when you look at traditional wisdom, it just makes so much sense.
Oh,
There's really
100%.
no argument against it. So yeah, the more that I can learn that way, I'm in it.
Yeah, and but they've tried so hard to squash it, right? They've tried so
Yeah.
hard to get rid of it. And I know that there's atrocities against natives all over the world. And, we talked about Beothuk being wiped out in Newfoundland, but
Mm.
I mean, have you heard of the residential schools?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I mean, I spent most of my 20s in Florida. So I left when I was 18 and then was away from Canada for, 8, 9 years. So I was very much away from Canada and anything that had to do with Canada. And then I came back in 2015, and then that's when everything was really coming out with truth and reconciliation and them uncovering graves and everything of residential schools, children that were abused and taken
Mhm.
from their families. And it just like hit me like a ton of bricks because I had not even heard of residential schools before then. And it shocked me to know that in 1996 they were still operating schools. And schools, they weren't really schools, but um, I was a kid myself. I was going to school then too, and so it was mind-blowing to hear that, there were children my age that were being taken from their parents and then completely indoctrinated and abused, and I just couldn't believe it. It
Mhm.
was definitely contributing for sure to some of the wake up that I've gone through in the last couple of years. But yeah, Canada, I mean, I know Canada's not the only one, but have a rocky history with that. And it was to literally, and I don't like to use the words, but to take the Indian out of the child. And it's like
Mhm.
that's literally taking them away from their culture. It's taking them it's breaking everything down, you know, and we don't want to lose that history. We don't want to lose that culture because that connection to Mother Earth, the land, is so, so incredibly important.
Yeah. And Newfoundland's got such an interesting history that way. Like I think that I had one friend when I was there who is native. And actually my children, their father was, because they did this whole thing, there was, because I was actually there in 97. That's when I arrived there. Um, and so it was probably actually early 2000s, there was a big shift to trying to establish if there was any Beothic bloodlines. It's
Mm,
actually now I think, oh God, what was really going on then, right? Um, because they did this whole going to anyone who, so anyone who had any kind of native blood, they were basically saying, well, you know, come and get tested. And they needed the oldest female relative in a family to try and establish if there's any Beothic left in the bloodline. Because apparently it was only with those older women that they could find the gene that would indicate that.
mm,
Um, Now, from my understanding of the band that the kid's dad was a part of, um, they didn't find any, but I'm not sure that they would have actually told anyone, because my understanding is that when when they were starting to get colonized in Newfoundland, um, the Beothic that were there would intermarry with the Micmac, or they would even just say we're Micmac
yeah. Yeah.
because that was safer. They weren't trying to kill the Micmac; they were trying to kill the Beothic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that my children's great grandfather was, you know, because it's such an interesting place, right? Like they had all those little settlements. So he was from Woods Island, which is out in the trying to think what it's Corner Brooks
Okay.
harbor there. And so he was definitely part something. You can see it when you look at them, or when you looked at them. Um, but again, they would like that was like he would never have let anybody know that. He was absolutely like they
No.
were absolutely not going to admit anything like that.
Yeah.
And they were also very Irish, so basically they just went with the Irish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you bring that up because in the past year or so I've always had actually my whole life a pull towards I guess native. I don't know how to say it, like just I just had a pull to native ways, I guess. Um, Not that I want to give any credit to Disney, but Pocahontas really spoke to me as a kid, and definitely part of my wake up journey, the whole phrase of every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name, has really, really resonated with me. And my family on my grandmother's side, although it's never been fully, and maybe this has just been not, it's been covered up or whatnot, there's always been talks that there's Indian blood in my grandmother's side. And I know my grandmother's brother had a number of years tried to get Indian status, so he was trying to trace it back. And he could trace it back, I think, like 5 or 6 generations, but just didn't go any further with it. And in the last year, I had a strong pull last year about it, especially with the Beothic. I was doing some research, and there's actually a DNA or genetic professor at Memorial University in St. John's that studies First Nations people of Newfoundland. And I got really into it. I'm going to reach out to this person. I emailed him and just kind of told him, like, I think that there's somebody in my family who, may have native blood. I just want to know, how I can go about that. And he basically said that pretty much everybody in Newfoundland is actually has a connection to the natives because one, there's that dilution of where they were, you know, um, intermingling, I guess, for lack of a better description. Um, he said that pretty much everyone in Newfoundland has a connection to First Nations. And then he went on to say, he's like, if you really want to know, you have to get a DNA test. And he said it's a particular type of DNA test. He sent me a link, and there was something that just told me no, and I
Yeah.
didn't go forward with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. I believe that. I think 100%. And I think that actually around the
Believe
world,
with the DNA, or that I've got blood in me.
oh, that you've got that everyone in Newfoundland has got
Oh
that
yeah. Yeah,
thing. I
yeah, yeah.
mean, it's not, I mean, yeah, maybe I'm not going to say that. That was probably not the best thing. Because they were very small communities,
Yeah.
there was not a huge breeding pool. That's how I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was like incest or anything like that, but definitely your selection was small.
Yeah. But yeah, I do wonder now, like looking at that, because my kids we were in the midst of a very complicated, well, it became very complicated in Newfoundland. But me and my husband were separating. We moved back there so that he could be with his family because he'd been here for 10 years. And I wanted my kids to have that experience because I thought Newfoundland's just such a beautiful space, right? But yeah, so it was complicated because his mother and him tried to get the kids in their custody,
Mhm.
which forced us into a situation where we couldn't stay. Like we had to leave, but we had to go through a court process to get out. So when he came to me and said, I want photographs of the kids because they can have their Indian status, they can get their cards, but we need these passport photos. Well, I didn't trust him one bit. There was no way I was going to send him passport photos for the kids.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was just like, no. And also I was like, there isn't a rush on this. I know that the government was kind of at the time saying, you've got to kind of register with your band and then you can be tax free or you can get your education kind of credits and stuff. But I was like, my children are not going to cease to be affiliated by blood
Right.
just because somebody else is putting a timestamp on it. But yeah, it was, yeah, now I think back and I'm like, there was definitely something up at that point because they were really rushing stuff through. And
Yeah, and it's still questionable today, and I don't know if I should even be talking about this, but especially, yeah, well, we'll just go with it. I'll say it, whatever. Um, it's interesting to me that Canada, I think it was last year, if you look at the budget for Canada, that the number two expenses, and they were like top, like kind of the same ballpark, was truth and reconciliation, which I said that term earlier. Do you know what the truth and reconciliation
yeah,
is?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's that process of trying to actually kind of bring, I guess, equity, right?
Yeah, it's they made a holiday the end of September called Truth and Reconciliation Day. And it bothers me, not because there's a holiday to honor the natives. By all means, we should honor the natives every day because they are the original stewards of the land, and all of that. But you go to Walmart or any of the major stores, and they've just got t-shirts and chocolates and everything. It's like, Truth and Reconciliation Day. And I'm like, you created a holiday for capitalism, for
Yeah.
to sell things. It's not about selling things. That's not going to fix it. And I'm willing to bet that all the money from those things are definitely not going into the hands of the natives.
Yeah, 100%. And we've got I mean, we've got a different situation, but similar here. Because we just had so Maori New Year is in the middle of the year and it's all around the appearance of Pleiades on the horizon, which indicates the Maori New Year, Matariki, and so that has been made into an official holiday. And again, it's a really tricky like these are really tricky subjects
Yeah.
because you don't want to say something that's going to be misconstrued. But they are really important conversations. Like we need to be having these conversations because with the whole thing with the Maori here, The whole thing. I mean, like with the government policies and this kind of pushing through an agenda around it, it does feel like it's got very little to do with the actual people. It
Yeah.
might have a lot to do with some of the very high up people, but not much with everybody else.
No.
And recently we just had, we've got this thing going on here where there's a proposed bill amendment to change the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, which was, kind of, it's seen as our founding document. I don't know why it's seen as our founding document, because in international law, there is a term called contra preferentiam, which means that you follow the native language version of a treaty because that's more likely to be the actual terms that the natives agreed to.
Makes
So,
sense.
yeah, but we've never done that. We've always just followed the English version of the treaty. So that doesn't quite make sense. Plus, there were other treaties preceding it. And plus, they were not the original. Now, I'm not saying that the people here now don't have genealogical ties, because I think it's the same thing again. But Maori were not the original people in New Zealand. There were at least two other groups of people who were there before. Now, I believe that again, it's like the Micmac coming in, or the Beothuk situation. It's this intermarriage thing, because
Right.
that's how you maintain your your life. Like that is a survival mechanism. So you intermarry, and sometimes that's not by choice, sometimes that's a coercion, but like literally I think that's how the world has been operating for quite some time.
Yeah.
And so it becomes really tricky, because we've got this thing happening here, same thing. They're really pushing an agenda. They've got people up in arms and marching. Now, this proposed bill, these amendments, are never going to go anywhere. It's all a big farce, because there's actually no real support for it. And also, they're talking about changing the principles that were set down by the Waitangi Tribunal in 1975. Again, it's got nothing to do with the actual treaty, like it doesn't go back to contra preferentiam. So all of these things are just bastardizations of a legal framework that allows for people to create like a vision of what being Maori or Indigenous is, and it just doesn't really touch the sides for people who live a normal life. It's really going to just siphon money off for some of the very higher up people, and and like everything else, it's just a big trick. Like nobody's got any interest in raising living standards or making sure that the children are better looked after and safer.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That
it's
resonates. Oops, sorry. That resonates so much with me. And it's when you say about it being a farce, it's a division tactic, it's that
yeah,
divide and conquer that they keep doing over and over in every way, shape, or form that they can do, even down to having a left and right party in politics, which are
exactly
really just the same
the
beast.
same. Yeah. Yeah, and it's really, I mean, I just feel so sad about it, because people who, I don't know, like I remember 15 years ago doing Maori studies, getting engaged with that process, learning about the tikanga, which is the customary part of the culture, and and learning the language. But then I actually more recently have learned a bit more. I enrolled to learn Tongan because my grandfather was half Tongan. So um so but in the time that I kind of moved into that, a whole lot of people here have been encouraged to go and learn te reo Maori. So there's this big shift you know of the middle class into kind of appreciating what Maori culture lends us, and what its gifts and strengths are. But again, I don't know, like it doesn't feel genuine. Like I'm sure that the people who are participating are genuinely interested,
Right.
but it feels like there is a real push to try and make people see things in a certain way.
Yeah, which is usually a red flag, right? If they're literally pushing something, it's
yeah,
anybody who's privy to that will be able to see right through it.
yeah, exactly. Anyway,
Yeah.
there's enough of that.
Yeah. Shouldn't give it too much
Lighten
energy, I guess, but we don't want to get banned from YouTube or something.
up. That's right. I mean, it's unlikely with my incredible reach on this channel.
Maybe this is the one that goes viral.
Maybe. It'll probably be cancelled. But yeah, because we had one of the young Maori MPs stood up and did a haka in the middle of Parliament, and so that was reported around the world, and there was, and the haka is stirring and it is emotional.
Yeah.
It's just that is how you are. It's like you said about Pocahontas, right? Like, yes, it grips you, it gives you a truth that you go, I feel that is so true.
Yeah.
And then it changes the story so
Yeah.
that you know that there's a truth in there. They hook you in, but then they try to carry you along on a different current.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how they're able to fool the masses, right? It's like 80% truth and 20% bullshit. Or
I
maybe
think
it's
you're
the
quite
opposite.
generous here.
Yeah. I was gonna say maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's 80% bullshit, 20% truth. I don't
Uh,
know.
I mean, who knows? But yeah, definitely it feels like the truest way to know yourself and everything else is to actually just to be, to
Yeah.
go out and be in nature and to engage in that way, and to
And with
learn
people.
from yeah, and learn from people who have the real wisdom.
Hmm.
And you know who they are because they're not charging thousands of dollars for it,
Yeah.
and they're generous, and they are the people who will respond to you when you write to them, even if it's not much, it's just that's an indication of what kind of person they are.
Hmm. No, that's definitely food for thought as well. That's
Yeah.
good. Like you and Narita.
Well, Narita's just, done an amazing job, hasn't she? So you came across her podcast. Had you come across her before the Rachel interview?
I think I was like listening to her podcast and then I just happened to find the Rachel one. It wasn't that the Rachel was the first podcast.
Right,
And I'm
yeah.
not even sure how I found Narita. I think that might have been the Sky to Earth podcast, I think it is, with
Oh, okay.
Dale and
Maddie.
Maddie, yeah. So I think I was listening to a little bit of theirs first, and then I somehow came across Narita. It's basically been a year of podcast to podcast to podcasts that have just guided me to the path that I'm on now. The first real podcast that really got me hooked, and I was like, I probably listened to at least 100 of their episodes, and that's Here for the Truth with Joel and Erasmus.
Oh, okay. I don't know that one, Sarah. I'm
Oh,
gonna go and find it.
yeah, yeah, you should. They speak a they don't they are getting I haven't actually listened to some of their recent stuff because I'm busy doing other stuff and listening to other podcasts. But Here for the Truth, in the beginning, how I got into it, they had this one person on there, Mark Grober, who has written it's not really a million books, but he's written a lot of books where it's like the upside down to medicine, the upside down to the way of thinking, the upside down to the cosmos and all of that. And so I found Mark Grober in a different sense, because I think he did a podcast or like a whole little mini podcast series. I think it was called like what was that called? Science of You? Or I can't remember the name of it. We'll have to look it up. But
Yeah.
anyway, what happens is when I find somebody that really speaks to me, then I have to go and find all the interviews and things that they've done so I can just learn more because they might say something a little different in another episode. Anyway, that was how I found Here for the Truth, was looking for Mark Grober interviews. So Mark Grober, Here for the Truth, Narita, Rachel, Ben, Ley Love Down, you.
Yay. Packaged nicely.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you and Billiana are hosting your own podcast, which is a really lovely listen. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It on this journey, because Billiana wasn't part of it originally. It was I was just a single host with very, very short episodes. But a few months ago, I just like woke up one morning and it just like this overwhelming sensation. I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast. and it's going to be about dreams. And it just like came to me. And I laid in bed, as I often do, like when I get these ideas, like, usually when I first wake up. So I'll just lay in bed and then just have this like internal monologue happening. I'm like, okay, well, what's the name of the podcast going to be? And I'm usually terrible with coming up with names. Like I'm not great when it comes to coming up with names. And it just came in my head, Dream Oracle for you. And I was like, okay, that's what it's gonna be. And yeah, so started it. The whole purpose I wanted, the vision I wanted for the podcast was, first of all, not many people talk about their dreams. And for me, my dreams have been, especially in the past year, have been super vivid. And I will spend time with people in my dreams, relatives, dead or alive. People that I haven't seen in a very, very, very long time will end up being in my dreams. And I'll be like, oh, I should reach out to that person. Or, things will come up. And as I went on this journey of knowing that there's something more, I really felt that dreams have more to tell us than just being some figment of the imagination or neurons firing, as I think one of the famous researchers had said. And so my idea was to create this community of where you could openly discuss dreams. You can, just dive deep, talk about dreams, and with my intuitive abilities that have been developing, I've been noticing that I'm able to kind of decode dreams a little bit, like just get a sense for what the message is that's coming through. And so that's what I wanted to provide,
Mhm.
was a place where people could send me their dreams. I can, of course, dreams are very personal, I believe. So, the message that's coming through in one symbol in one dream might not be the same meaning for somebody else if it showed up for them. So it definitely is a very personal thing. But I think when you use your heart and you intuitively get guided, you'll be able to piece things together. And then how Biljana came into the picture was, again, Narita. I was listening to Narita's podcast and with Biljana on there, Biljana mentioned dreams, and I just like hit pause, typed out an email to Biljana. I had already emailed her previously with something related to music and Ley Love Down because she's a social media coordinator for Ley Love Down, but she's also involved with the music side of things as well. And so I just emailed her. I was like, I'd like to have you on my podcast. And we hit it off so well. We really, really deeply connecting, as you can hear from the podcast. And I was like, okay, you want to be my co-host? And it's just gone from there. It's been great. It's only been like 3 weeks, but it seems like it's been so much longer.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I enjoyed listening. I've only listened to the first one so far,
Okay.
but yeah, I enjoyed that, and I can see that connection with you and Billiana. It's a really nice thing to hear, and it's really, I mean, that's one of the strengths of the Ley Love Down project, isn't it? It's like suddenly there's these connections created that just make it so easy. I guess you kind of know I don't know, the kind of person who's going to be interested in this. Like if they're open to that, then they're going to be pretty open to a lot of other things. So yeah, it's a wonderful way to reach out and find people. So that's a really cool thing. So that's you in Nova Scotia, Billiana in Australia.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a tricky time zone navigation.
Yeah, it is. We make it work. Usually the podcast starts at about 6:45, 7 o'clock in the morning for me, and that's like, you know, going on 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. I don't know which it is for Biljana. We have also done the opposite, so it'll be morning for her and, about this time
Yeah.
for me. So we make it work. We've got a schedule, so we record every Monday morning, and it's great because the further I get into, I guess, what my soul path is, the harder I'm finding it to go to my regular day job because I just want to be doing all of this cool stuff. And so Mondays in particular, I find and I'm sure it's true for anybody, you know, you have your 2-day weekend and then you're like, oh, I gotta go to work on Monday. But now it's like, I gotta go to sleep. I have to get up early because I'm gonna record with Billiana. You know, it's just that, and it really kicks off my week in a good way now too. So,
That's so cool. I did a course in lucid dreaming that David
ooh,
Wilcock.
making a note here now. I didn't think I was gonna write notes today, but here we go.
Well, I don't know if you need to write a note about this, to be honest, but anyway, in 2020, when the lockdown happened, I saw that he was going to run this course on lucid dreaming, and I thought, well, I've got nothing else to do, right? I'm going to do it. And another friend of mine who we had a little channeling foursome, and another friend from that did it as well. So that was quite good. But oh my God, man, that guy can talk. Like sometimes they were like 4 or 5 hour sessions.
Whew,
it was hard going.
yeah.
Um, and I mean, he's a very knowledgeable man, and he had lots of stuff to share. And you know, and there's always the added complication now of like how much do you trust that person. My personal feeling is if I can reach out and touch you, even if it's just virtually like this, like if I can have a conversation with you and get to feel you,
Mm,
then I can decide whether I'm gonna, you know, lay my trust in you. If I can't do that, then you know, I don't put too much stock in
mm,
anything, but I do appreciate the wisdom that was shared, and it did really open up that dream time for me. And because it was because there was nothing else going on, like I could get up every morning, but it turned into like 45 minutes every morning trying to scroll down all the stuff of my dreams, which is quite interesting now because I've gone back and looked at quite a lot of that. Um, but it definitely was an adventure. Like it really opened things up. And I think I'd already started doing like setting an intention. Oh yeah,
mhm.
because I did a retreat with these 4 women. We went to a Judy Satori retreat, which literally was like a week before the lockdowns happened. And she had taught us to do this kind of anti-clockwise over our third eye, setting an
Yeah.
intention before we went to sleep. So I had just kind of tweaked that so that I could lay my intention in every night before I went to sleep. And I think I realized how much that was an important thing to do because
Mm,
your sleep time is such a time of being open.
yeah.
And you know, if you are working in other dimensions and you know able to kind of travel in that space, you know, there's a lot of potential for things to happen.
Yep.
So I think, well, if that's gonna happen, if there's any potential, I want to really make a point of knowing what my intention is and not allowing that to be corrupted in any way by anybody else. Because you definitely know when you're having a funny dream that doesn't feel good, that you know, there's a real feeling sometimes of things being brought in to your field rather than just you exploring.
Right,
Um,
right. Yes, yes. I'm very aware of that. I have had dreams where I've literally have woken up to feel like somebody was like holding me down. And it wasn't like I was in the dream, I wasn't being held down, but it actually felt like it on my
well,
body,
that's like
which
the hag, right?
I guess, but I've never seen her, so I don't know.
Well, that's a funny thing. Well, because I never knew there was a name for it, but I'd
Mm,
had conversations when I was a teenager with a friend who'd had quite a lot happening in his room. And then when I was about 19 and I was going out with this guy, it wasn't a good situation. Um, and I had this dream where I was in the place that our little sleep out, and this woman walked around the outside of the house and was looking in the windows, and I was seeing myself in there. But of course, I, so I felt like I was awake, but I wasn't awake. And it wasn't how I would have seen anyway, because there would have been blinds closed. But yeah, and then I woke up and just felt that kind of, you know, that pressing down feeling. And it was terrifying. And then years later, when I went to Newfoundland and I read some stuff about the hag, and that was the name that was given for that phenomenon. And I was like, wow, that, you know, because it was a woman that I saw. So
mm.
um it all made sense to me. But yeah, you've
Yeah,
got
no,
some
that's
fascinating things over your way in that kind of folklory fashion, because I
yeah.
guess that melding of quite a few different cultures and being quite isolated in Newfoundland and probably Nova Scotia a bit too, eh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Nova Scotia, at least the area that I live in, is a little bit more busy. It's funny because when I was doing university and, all through my 20s, I thought that, oh, I'm gonna live in a big city, that I was a big city girl. And now it's like I want to be like literally in the middle of the woods, not next to anything. And we visit a small area of Nova Scotia that is very, very rural, like population of like 100 people. My fiance has family there, and we go every couple of months, and I cannot wait until we go. I'm always looking forward to it because it's just like stepping away from all of the just the stimulation, that comes from cars going down the street, a motorcycle that's revving its engine, and then you've got the ambulance, and then you've just got planes flying over, and just electricity everywhere.
Yeah.
It's so much the cell towers and whatnot. Um, yeah, I went off a little bit of tangent there. We're talking about Newfoundland, real Newfoundland, and
Well, it
the
was, I
culture
mean,
and the
just that
drags.
kind of with the connection with the dream space. And do you know the funny thing for me is I dream a lot about Newfoundland. Like,
Really?
yeah, a lot.
Ooh.
Because there was such an intense emotional and traumatic kind of situation when I was there last. I had for the longest time I had dreams because I felt like I was going to lose my children. So it was like a terrifying experience. And so when I came back from there, right up until I'd say 2018, 2019, I was still having dreams of going and taking the kids, but like being very anxious about it. And then
Mm.
like having to let the grandparents see the children, but being very anxious that they were going to try and take them. And yeah, but it's fascinating how much of my dream life still connects to the rock.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could go back and watch one of my recurring episodes. They're only short. They're like before Billiana, you can get my podcast in for like 20 minutes or less.
I love that.
Um, but I spoke about recurring dreams where I mentioned that if there's a message that you're meant to have, it's going to keep on coming until you address it and figure it out. So just food for thought there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because what happened when I got married again in 2019, I mean, I just time-wise, I'm only kind of putting that there at the moment and going, okay, maybe that's significant. At that point, those dreams stopped being negative. So
Mm,
then I started to visit friends and people in Newfoundland that I had connection to without the anxiety. And
mhm.
probably also that my children were fairly well grown at that point too.
Yeah.
So the
It could
anxiety.
also mean that you just have a deep connection to Newfoundland beyond the time that you actually spent there, I get the feeling that you're an old soul, so it could have been a different timeline. And the fact that you and I have like, connected so easily, I feel that we probably knew each other in a past lifetime too.
Yeah, yeah.
And
No, I
and
think you're
that's
right. I
true.
think there's
Yeah.
something about that place when yeah, when you leave it, it doesn't leave you.
Oh, that's really sweet. No, it's true. And I definitely have been up and down with how I felt about that. I mean, growing up in Newfoundland and the rural town, and then everybody knows everybody. Everybody's in everybody's business, If an ambulance goes up the street, everybody is calling up everybody to figure out who it is. So there's not exactly any privacy in a small community. And at the age of 14, I had my first experience of seeing a real city where I got to go visit Montreal. And I just fell in love, which is my comments in my 20s, where I thought I was always going to be a big city girl. But definitely in my in my older age and wisdom, I I truly recognize the beauty of Newfoundland. And even those the things that I ran away from, I guess, when I was 18, because I left when I was 18, and the number of times I've been back to Newfoundland, I think I can count more times on one hand now, but at some point, like very few, because I was very much into my studies and just it was expensive to fly from Florida to Newfoundland. You're talking like $1,500, $2,000 just to fly back, which is like half a semester at school. So it wasn't something that I did often. But the one thing that I definitely miss about Newfoundland and its small communities is the community itself. Even though there's not any privacy, so to say, but the communities had each other's back. So if somebody needed something in the community was there. Like everybody just drop everything they're doing. You would have people like when my grandpa passed away and my grandma was there, she would just have people would just come with food and she wouldn't have to cook for like weeks on end. She would sometimes have too much food because so many people would just want to come and give their support and their love. And that's something that I definitely miss living in a bigger center.
Yeah.
And it's also
Mm.
something that I keep on when I think about the problems in the world, and there's a lot of changes that will happen in the coming years, I can't help but think that a major part of that has to be a focus on communities. We
Yeah.
got to like globalism, capitalism, sure, it's got its place, but we need to bring it back to the communities, and communities need to support each other and focus on each other because that's who you live with and that's who should be there to support you.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, that's a really beautiful part um of living in a place like that, isn't it? It's isolated in so many ways. It creates a bigger community of people who, do take care of each other. I was there for almost 2 years the first time when I was 22. And it took like a year for some people. I was working in a cafe. My friend Renee ran a cafe and let me work there. And there were people who came and spoke to me pretty much every day for like a year before they even asked me where I was from. Like it was a funny in New Zealand, everybody's like out front friendly, but really behind the scenes, you just like realize that, it's not quite as friendly as it seems.
Mm,
Whereas Newfoundland, it felt like they weren't out front friendly. They would take their time and they'd get to know you. And then once they decided you were okay, then it was like nothing would ever get in the way at that point because their hearts are gold.
yeah,
But yeah, it was like this like little suspicion about outsiders. But yeah, really, once you were embraced by the community, you have a place there.
yeah, 100%. And Newfoundland played a big part of during 9/11 as well, right? With it being the first part of North America that you have from any of the Atlantic flights, and they've made like movies or plays and stuff about it. But the town of Gander, which I think has somewhere around 10,000 people, which is a big city in Newfoundland, um, it doubled its population with all the flights that got granted in Newfoundland and or in Gander. And then they didn't have anywhere to house these
Yeah.
10,000 passengers. So they've got buses in and literally just they went out to the communities, all of the little outport communities. My grandparents actually took in two passengers that they brought into their home and were pretty much part of the family then, and they
That's so
brought
funny. That's where my in-laws lived there when I first went. But I
it
think
was
they'd maybe
Gander.
left and gone to Corner Brook by the time that, yeah, I can't remember, but I don't, no, they were still there, but I'm not sure that they took anybody in.
Yeah.
But generally, I heard that too. And I think somebody did some study once but and said, like, for the size and the population, the generosity of people in Newfoundland was just off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's that is the history of Newfoundland, and that's genuinely who the people are, because it comes from the history and living in Newfoundland. Like it's not, especially before things became more globalized, back in the day when you just had all these outport fishing communities, before you were able to, have a car and drive 30 minutes to actually go get food, and before there was electricity and everything, it was a hard place to live. There's a reason why it's called the Rock. Yes, it is a big hunk of rock, but it kind of also got the name because it was a hard place to live, and the hardship that was growing up in Newfoundland. But what it did was it just made the people really strong
Mm.
and just very, very just genuine, compassionate, good people.
Yeah. Well, that's our love letter to Newfoundland.
Yeah,
I think that I will close this off there so that you can get on with your things and we can. I would love to do this again one day with you, Sarah.
yeah,
And I'm even
absolutely.
like visioning one day. I want my children to go back to Newfoundland. Like they don't have any interest at the moment. Um, but I'm hoping that they won't close the door. To me, it's a really special place and, it's a part of them. Um, so I'm almost having visions of like going with them and meeting you and like
Oh,
doing an adventure over there.
yeah, I'm down for it. I've been to quite a few places in Newfoundland, but there's one place that I've not been that I've always wanted to go. We talked about the Vikings earlier, is
Oh yeah.
actually Lanson Meadows. So I've
Yeah,
not,
me neither. I want to do
yeah,
that.
so there we go.
Okay. And we'll
And
do some Ley Love Down there.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Layla, Newfoundland definitely, I don't know if it needs it, but there's definitely, I think Newfoundland is an energetically important place as well. So
Yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And I can't wait to watch more of your podcast with Filiana and the ones that you did before that. Obviously, that's a good I love little snippet ones where I can go and have a look and not, I don't have to worry about not finishing.
Yeah.
Um, so that's going to be fun. So I might get all of your details and then I'll put them down in the show notes.
Beautiful. I would appreciate that. And I
Okay, lovely.
greatly appreciate you inviting me on today, and just it was like we were two friends catching up. It was just really great. I was a little bit nervous in the beginning, but no, this was really beautiful. You're a beautiful person. It was great to meet you, and I can't wait
Oh,
to come back next time, and also cannot wait to meet you on the rock at some time in
yeah,
the future.
thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel the same way about you. And thank you for all of the kind and care that you have shown me. You've been checking in and making sure I'm okay. And I'm 100% okay. But it's been
Beautiful.
lovely to have that. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do next. And we will definitely be in touch.
Great. Thank you. I can't wait. Hope you have a
And
beautiful day and a
thank
safe
you.
trip.
And from my heart to yours. Namaste.